Sri Aurobindo once said that Valmiki, Vyas, and Kalidas are the essence of the history of ancient India. And even if all else were lost, they would still be its sole and sufficient cultural history. And he added that while Vyasa was a representative of the intellectual mood of Indian civilization, Valmiki represented its moral side. Sri Aurobindo tells us that what Valmiki did was to take refuge in, as far as the time frame of his poem goes, he takes refuge in a past age of national greatness and virtue. And this age was distant enough so that it could have been beautifully idealized in a poetic composition, and yet near enough to have left sufficient evidence, if you will, or sufficient material for painting a great picture of civilization. And this age that Sri Aurobindo speaks of, he says this age must have existed in at least some form or the other, because there is a persistent tradition or a persistent mention of it throughout much of the Sanskrit literature. So, thus, what we see in Ramayana is that the Vedic um, portrayal of the strife of divine with titanic forces is now depicted in much purer, ideal, embodied forms in this in the narrative of the Ramayana. So we also find here this great imaginative heightening of both the good and the evil in human character in almost like supernatural dimensions. So on one side, the poet paints for us a picture of an ideal manhood, a divine beauty of virtue, a divine beauty of ethical order. And this picture is not only just of an individual, but also of an entire civilization, of a society which is founded on dharma, which upholds the highest moral ideal, and yet at the same time has a great appeal to because of its aesthetic grace, because of its charm and beauty and harmony and sweetness. So we are given a picture of this ideal dharmic civilization where both the ethical and the aesthetic tendencies of higher mind are beautifully harmonized. And then on the other side, we have another kind of a world, another picture where the wild and anarchic, amorphous forces of, again, almost superhuman egoism, self will, and violence, all of that, which is the exact opposite of a civilized life based on dharma. We could say that one of the main reasons why Ramayana has been so successful and has made for itself such a special place in the collective Indian consciousness and imagination is that it has been able to successfully transcribe that supraphysical or spiritual force which has the ability to awaken the individual, and even awaken a nation through inspiration, through uplifting the consciousness. The portrayals, especially of Rama and Sita, are full of this living truth of the ideal life, of the greatness that a man and woman can aspire to and should aspire to, and can become that when that innermost part of one's being, which is the soul, the divine spark, is given a chance to express itself. So for the vast majority of Indians, Ramayan continues to be the story of Prabhu Sri Ram, Maryada Purushottam, the avatar of Sri Vishnu. And as we know, Sri Aurobindo has dealt with this concept of avatarhood in much detail in his essays on the Gita. Just to mention briefly, he says, avatar descends. Avatar is one when the divine descends in human form to give a dharma, a method of inner and outer living, a way, a rule, and a law of molding oneself by which a human being can grow towards divinity. That is the work of an avatar. And Rama in the history of the spiritual history of Indian avatars in the Indian spiritual lineage, Rama's work was that he was the avatar of the sattvic mind. And this is why we find in Valmiki's Ramayana the continuous narrative of Rama, who is working tirelessly to establish the supremacy of the ethical, aesthetic, moral, and mental consciousness over the anarchic, physical, vitalistic consciousness of the Rakshasa and the Vanara. Rama is one who lives by the dharma, by his swadharma, by the kula dharma, by his jati dharma, by the dharma of that is relevant for his time and age. And he's also working towards establishing a society that is based on the ideal of dharma. And yet, Rama being an avatar, we also find in the narrative several instances where Rama sort of pushes the boundaries of the existing dharmic conventions and is able to bring in a new light to re-establish the spirit, to re-establish the truth of the ideal by like getting rid of the outer shells, the outer empty forms that have lost their relevance, that over the course of time that just become redundant. So in that sense, the Ramayana successfully embodies for the Indian imagination in particular the highest and the tenderest human ideals of character. The virtues that the Indian mind has always been familiar with, and the Indian mind always values the virtues of strength and courage, gentleness, purity, self sacrifice, fidelity. All these Ramayana presents in beautiful, gentle, harmonious, suave forms, and which makes them appealing to the higher aesthetic sense of the human mind, and appeals also to the higher emotional, the higher vital of the human nature. um, Ramayana also speaks of higher morals, and yet it does not present them in a dry, ascetic, austere sort of way, but it also does not reduce them to their mere commonness, to their mere coarseness. What it does so magnificently is that it lends some sort of a high divinity, a high divineness to what we may understand as the ordinary experiences or ordinary things of life, whether it is the conjugal life or whether it is life with the family, the love between parents, the love for the parents, the love between siblings, the nature of love between friends, the kind of harmony and love and goodwill between a prince or a leader and the people, the praja. Again, all these things have been molded, have been touched by the divinity. Their divinity has been brought out by the poet so as to make these things more appealing to the human intelligence and to the higher human vital for ages and ages to come. So, in that sense, Sri Aurobindo says that the magnificent work of Valmiki has been an agent of almost incalculable power in the molding of the cultural mind of India. Thank you.